I know the traffic was a little hairy tonight, and we're still waiting for a few people to show up, but we got a lot of talking to do and not much time, so we don't want to waste a minute. We're here. Okay, Daddy. I do like when you get women together, a party starts, so that's the best part of tonight. Good evening, everybody. I'm Ann Mataross. I'm director of the Western Pennsylvania Sports Museum and chief curator here at the History Center. On behalf of our president and CEO, Andy Masick, and our board, I'd like to welcome you all. We're thrilled to have you here. I hope you had a chance to tour the Sports Museum and visit our featured exhibit, A Woman's Place, on the first floor before the event started. If not, make sure you see them. That exhibit, A Women's Place, is here through January 20th. We've just extended it. And I worked on the curation with my colleague, senior curator Leslie Zabilik, who's here tonight, and Emily Ruby. And that exhibit really is the inspiration for our program tonight. Before we start, I just want to take a second and recognize a couple of people in our audience, though frankly, when I looked over the registration page, I could have gotten about half of you to stand up, but I just want to, is Carol Semple Thompson here? I know she was coming. There she is. Oh my gosh. A Hall of Fame golfer, a 7-time USGA champion, one of the greatest amateurs ever to play the sport. We're thrilled to have Carol in the audience tonight. I want to recognize Dana Harris, who's here. She's a member of our board, the co-owner of the Pittsburgh Passion with her son, Doc. Is Ann Zacharias here? She's also a member of our board. She was coming tonight. All these women are members of our Sports Museum Champions Committee, so they contribute to the development of the Sports Museum, along with a brand new member, Kristen Price. I don't know if Kristen's gotten here tonight. Thank you. And could it be a Western Pennsylvania Sports Museum event if we didn't have a 4-time Super Bowl champion in the audience? John Kolb, thanks for being with us tonight. I mean, the things we take for granted in Pittsburgh, unbelievable. And I think a number of the Pittsburgh Passion are here with us as well tonight, a number of the players from that team. So thank you. I mean, it's everyone. My old AD from Oakland Catholic, who's here to see a few alums, Mary Pat. It's so great to have so many people that are so supportive of all we do here and such great members of our community. Quick note about how the program's going to run tonight. There's going to be a 1-hour panel discussion. We probably won't be able to keep it to an hour, but we're going to try. And then we're going to have a half an hour of Q&A. Jess Smith, who is our public programs manager, is going to run the mic for that and help plan tonight's event to us. So thank you, Jess. So let me introduce these women. I could spend the next hour talking about their accomplishments. We are thrilled to have them here. Because of the limited time for our discussion, I'm just going to do a quick introduction. I hope their many achievements are going to emerge as we do the question and answer part of the program tonight and as the program proceeds. But let's meet them all. First, to my left, Teresa Conn, who has been a co-owner and coach of the Pittsburgh Passion football team since 2004. During that time, the Passion have won 3 national championships, established the longest winning streak in professional football, not just women's football, and I don't mean just women's football, but in professional football, with 27 straight wins from 2014 to 2016, set numerous individual and team records. Teresa. It is my great personal pleasure to have our next panelist with us tonight, Alfreeda Goff, to get her to come back to Western Pennsylvania for this event. I discovered her story when I was researching Title IX, and it blew me away. And we had a conversation then, and I knew if we ever did something like this, I wanted her back. Now retired, this Western Pennsylvania native had a 40-plus year career in intercollegiate athletics. It started at the University of Pittsburgh, then went to Virginia Commonwealth, Virginia State, and the MCC Horizon League. She remains one of the most respected leaders and pioneers in intercollegiate athletic administration. Alfreeda. If you want to talk about basketball, you can't talk about basketball without this next panelist, Suzie McConnell Serio. A 2-time Olympic medalist, she has achieved at every level in women's basketball: high school, college, international competition, the WNBA. and as a player, coach, and motivator of athletes is revered and hero to many of us. Suzie.
Thank you.
My former colleague and good friend, Caroline Fitzgerald, a leading expert on the business side of women's sports and a thought leader around gender equity in sports. In 2020, Caroline founded the Women's Sports Business Media Outlet and Consultancy Goals, and I always tell her dad, when I retire, I'm going to go work for her. Please. Caroline Fitzgerald. So I want to ask a question. I used to teach a class for young girls at the JCC on girls in sports. And I always ask the girls this question, and this is probably 10 or 15 years ago. I always ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up, and who are your role models? And it was always my concern that all of their role models were men. And then I would teach them about the great women's history of sports in this region. But I want to ask our panelists, when you were young, when you were growing up, what did you want to be, and who were you looking to as a role model at that time? Did you ever envision the path your lives were going to take? Teresa, you want to start?
Sure, I'd love to, but first I want to say, with the History Center here being #1 in the nation and what you do for women's sports, you cannot go anywhere in the United States and find a history center that recognizes women's sports. And thank you so much. You were. So, to answer your question, I know we're going to be moving quickly through. I don't know how many people in this room would remember, but I wanted to be the Bionic Woman. So, definitely was one of my non-personal role models. I think I was blessed to know young that my grandma, my mom, selfless and just giving and kept the family together. I think I'll always, if I was being serious, always they're first. And my teachers and coaches, I was blessed to have very good, inspirational leaders in that. So,
Alfreeda?
My role model was Wilma Rudolph.
Yeah.
And her story is unbelievable. As a child, she had polio and became one of the fastest female runners. And this was the early 60s, and we didn't have sports to go to when we went to college. We had play days and intramurals. Yeah. So I am very grateful that I did have someone who had a work ethic that if I couldn't run as fast as she could, I could maybe work just as hard as she did.
That's great. Suzie?
You don't really see, when I was growing up, women's sports wasn't as prominent as it is now and not as visible. So I grew up in a big family, and so my role models as basketball were my 2 older brothers. That's who I learned from on a daily basis, playing all kind of sports. But if I was to pick a basketball player, a team is, I loved watching John Stockton play. He was a great point guard, and I ended up getting to meet him on the Olympic team. So it was something very special to me, meeting him when I was on the Olympic team with him. Yeah, sorry.
I mean, can I say Suzie McConnell? Is that embarrassing?
Yes.
A little bit embarrassing, but it's fine. I'm gonna ask Suzie for her autograph while we're sitting here. I mean, I joke a little, but I'm actually not kidding. I grew up wanting to be a point guard like Suzie, and then when I got a little older, my heroes were Brianna O'Rourke, who's in the audience today, who played at Penn State, Swin Cash. Oh my gosh, I could keep going down the line. Carmen Bruce, that was from a sports perspective. I think in general, though, I looked at my family a lot as my role models. Being from a big family where we played sports all the time, I wanted to be like my older sisters and my parents. So, but I'll go back to Suzie McConnell every day, 10 out of 10 times.
Did any of you have special mentors, coaches, people who really guided you in your career when you look back, played a big difference at a critical point in the decisions that you made? Anybody jump in?
My instructors at Slippery Rock. I'm a Slippery Rock grad and a health and PE major. And we didn't have the same experiences in sports like the men did on our campus, but our women leaders were unbelievable, and they were doing things with the USA teams. Like our field hockey coach and teacher was also the goalie. And so I got to say, well, if they're doing that now, what can we do as we go out into the world? And Dr. Griffin, she told all of the women she coached, and coaching was the intramural section of our program, that don't let anyone tell you you can't be what you want to be. And that has always been my personal goal, because my father also said that. So at age 4, I got to see Joe Louis box in Madison Square Garden. Didn't know what I was watching, but I was with my dad on his shoulders, and people were smoking, and there were 2 guys in the ring. So that's all I remember about that. But my parents were very supportive of me. My son was very supportive of my career, because I wasn't doing anything without his approval as a single mom. So those of you who are out there and you want to have families, don't let them tell you you can't coach, you can't be in professional sports and have children and have a husband. So that stigma is gone.
I'll jump in and go off of that. So I think my parents were really instrumental in helping me get on this path to work in women's sports. My dad's here tonight. What's up, Dad? Thanks for coming. So I'll tell a little story. So I'm from a big family. I'm one of 8 kids. And growing up, I feel like the only way you can organize 8 kids is by having them go outside and play sports, because what else are you going to do with 8 kids? So we all played a lot of baseball growing up. That was the first sport that I played. And when it came time for my parents to sign me up for my first baseball team, there wasn't a girls' baseball team in our neighborhood. So my parents, I don't even think they thought about it. They just signed me and my brother up to play for the same boys' baseball team. So we showed up to the first game. We were on the Sacred Heart Reds. I was ready to go. And I remember right away, almost, the other team started teasing us and taunting us, saying things like you'd hear in The Sandlot, like, girls can't play baseball, and we're going to crush this team. They have a girl on their team. And I had only been raised to know that I could do anything that I wanted to in sports, despite my gender, because of my gender. So I took the field, and I couldn't script this any better if I tried, but I was playing in the infield, and the first 3 players on the other team, those boys that were teasing us, they hit ground balls right to me, and I threw them all out, 1, 2, 3. It was like the shortest inning in the history of baseball. And that was a really defining moment in my life. I think I was 6 years old at the time, and I know it's weird to say you have this like aha moment when you're 6, but I walked off the field and I was like, yeah, proved you wrong, boys. Never again is someone going to tell me that I can't do something because I was a girl. And that was definitely instilled in me from a young age. And since then, I've just kind of always lived with that little chip on my shoulder. I think a lot of us have experiences like that in this room. I bet, raise your hand if you've kind of experienced that. Yeah, it's not a unique story, unfortunately, but I'm very grateful to come from a family that always empowered me like that.
Well, I think it's surprising because you're only just a little bit younger than I am, but they didn't have girls' teams when I started playing. So for 2 years, I played on a boys' basketball team and then played on a boys' baseball team. But then when there was more interest, they started having girls' teams. But I never imagined that I would ever be a coach. I never imagined that I would have a microphone in front of me or I would speak in front of people, because it was my biggest fear in my entire life. It was something I did not like at all. But I thought I went into education. That was my degree that I went into, was education. So I feel like I teach every day on the basketball court, even though I've never been in a classroom. But it's amazing how far women's sports has come and the opportunities now that they're given at a young age.
And I will follow up with that. I was happy to hear Caroline mention that one of her defining moments was when she was 6, because at any level that you coach at, we lost one of our coaches for when I was 5 years old, and we came from a very small town, and that was 55 years ago when I was 5 years old. You can do the math, but it was, we all came back, like what we were taught at such a young age, and we remember sometimes they need the team more than you. I think my last, 48 years of sharing and being a part of teams, I recognize that sometimes people need the team more than you. And he taught us so much about, the resilience and the stick together and the family and so many things that I've used my entire life, not just as an athlete, but as a teacher and a coach. And it was, at the funeral to see that many people from so many years ago, the impact that a coach has. So to answer your question, I would have picked Coach Buttrin.
Alfreeda, you've already alluded a little bit to this. Your entire career as an athlete occurred before Title IX was enacted in 1972. Talk about the opportunities that existed for you and your peers in high school and college athletics in the 1960s.
we did the slices, some of you are close, you understand the little, girls can only jump so far, run so far. I was a runner, and when I was in college, we didn't run more than a half mile, because if we did, we'd hurt our reproduction organs. Just so you know. 1988, we had to file a petition so we could get the marathon in, because no, they can't run that far. Well, they're running that far and plus some. But in 1969, I went to East Allegheny High School, brand new facility, and the board, and thank God for the fathers on the board who had daughters, said, we want our girls to have an athletic program. So they came to the 3 PE teachers and said, we want to start swimming, cross country, track and field, and basketball. So the 3 PE teachers, we said, hey, sign us up for that. And I'm happy to say that some of my former athletes from high school are here tonight. And they gave me so many, many, many opportunities to be around fine individuals who've become fine adults. But East Allegheny gave me the same budget that they gave. I was the track coach and cross-country coach that they gave the boys coach. But they didn't give me enough to do uniforms, so we went to Kmart. We had the navy blue shorts. We got gold shirts and tie-dyed them. And needless to say, I had over 100 girls come out for track and field. And I didn't believe in cutting anyone. I said, if you don't meet the standard, we'll find something for you to do. There's always something to do. But I never said, oh, you don't run fast enough, so you're done. And so for that, I want to thank my students who are here and my friends who are here when I was at Pitt, who were my trainers, because I always said, a coach is only as good as the trainers that are with them, because they're the ones that keep the kids on the team and keep them competitive and ready to go. So I owe a lot to all of them.
Let's talk for a second about your time at Pitt. Some of the data I've seen recently notes that about 25% of college athletic directors today are female. When you began your career as a coach, then an athletic administrator at Pitt, I imagine that women of color must have made up even a tiny portion of your colleagues in the NCAA. What did this demand of you as both a barrier breaker and a leader at that time?
Well, I was the only one in the room for a long, long time. But going back to what my parents, how they raised me, my professors, I said, if I don't do it, who will? Why not me? And I believe that each one reach one, and together you can raise each other up. And I had a lot of firsts. Some of them were very, very good, and some of them weren't so nice. I remember sitting in my office at Virginia State, and I was being interviewed. And they said, well, what's your long-term career goal? I said, I want to be an athletic director. So he immediately went to, oh, only for women's athletics. I said, no, the athletic director. And he busted out laughing. And I was like, that's okay, because that was the reaction. Women over a total athletic department did not exist. And when I became the athletic director at Virginia State, obviously I was the athletic director, and he was still working at the Post-Gazette, and I called him up. And I said, hey, how you doing? He goes, oh, Alfreeda, what are you doing? And I said, oh, by the way, I've just been appointed the athletic director of Virginia State. He goes, oh. And he said, you really did it. I said, yeah, because that's what I wanted to do, and I wasn't going to let anything or anybody stop me from doing that. So it was not always easy. Sometimes, because I was the only one in the room, and if they wanted a minority to represent them, I was the one. But I said, if I don't do it, there won't be any representation at all. And I'm happy to say that now I'm not the only one in the room. There are many who have come behind me. And my son, he's a minority male, but he is in athletics like me. And my granddaughters, the one, she's in business school, and she wants to do marketing and sports. So the doors have opened, not just for women, but for minorities. Because there was a time like we as women couldn't even get to the table. But when I got to the table, I made sure I was prepared, and I made sure I had a voice and wasn't just a token.
And thank you for the work that you did to make that possible for the people who came after you. Suzie, talk a little bit about, you're finishing up at Penn State, your storied career. We might mention that, I won't say 40 years, 4 decades later, I believe you still hold that NCAA career assist record that's yet to be challenged. But talk about your training for the Olympics at the same time. What's that like then? What are your experiences? What do you remember about that?
Well, Caitlin Clark did come close.
Yeah, she tried.
It's
but she
one
didn't get
record she
you.
did not break. But no, I was very fortunate playing at Penn State for Rainey Portland. She kind of, over the course of my career, prepared me for playing for USA Basketball, which I had the opportunity to play for each summer leading up to the Olympics in 1988. And now they have professional athletes, so they have training camps throughout the year for the professional athletes, and they may have 15, 18 in the pool of athletes that they choose from for the Olympics, and it carries over from one year to the next. Back then, we were all not professional athletes unless they went overseas to play. We didn't have any leagues in the United States. So there were 53 players invited to the training camp at Colorado Springs at the Olympic Training Center. And they started with 53, and it's over a 4 or 5 day period, and you're playing against the best players in the country, trying to be one of 12 players selected for the Olympic team. And I just remember the training that I had gone through, just because that was the most important goal that I'd ever set for myself, was to be on that Olympic team and represent our country. And then going through that process was just very grueling. It went from 53 to 21 to 18, and then finally 15, and then they named 12, and then 3 alternates. And I'll never forget, it was August 18th, 1988, when Coach K. Yao told me that I was one of the 12 players selected for the Olympic team. I mean, it was by far my biggest dream that I'd ever accomplished, of making the Olympic team. And then to win a gold medal and represent your country was just, it's unbelievable. To wear USA on your chest, to see the American flag, to hear our national anthem being played in the Olympics, it's just, it's really what every athlete strives for. So to be able to be up on that platform and experience it is amazing. And then I had the opportunity to do it again in '92 when I had made the Olympic team. And if you ever listen to any of the broadcasts during the Olympics, I was part of the team that was on the last losing team in the Olympics. We had won a bronze medal in '92, but it didn't take away from my Olympic experience and having that opportunity to represent your country. But you know, things are different, and it was back in '92 when I had come back to make a comeback. I had already gotten married, and I had a son who was a year and a half when I was playing in the Olympics. So it was pretty exciting to have not only my family there, but also my husband and my son watch me play.
And you had started your coaching career at Oakland Catholic as
At
well,
Oakland
right?
Catholic, way back then in 1990.
For my time.
Something I never thought I would do was to get into coaching, but it was an opportunity that presented itself. And it was my way, I felt, of giving back to the game of basketball and helping young players have some of the opportunities and experiences I was fortunate enough to have through the game of basketball. So I've loved it. I've been coaching ever since at various levels, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
That's great. Teresa, you were a multi-sport athlete, collegiate athlete at Slippery Rock, which is almost unheard of today in this era of specialization. First, how did you balance the demands of competing in a number of sports in the every year? And you both competed in sports that were team sports and individual sports, which is pretty amazing. What kind of lessons did that teach you that have informed your coaching and your training today?
Well, to answer the first question, I was blessed with an Energizer bunny heart, so that's the only way I survived, but I think a lot of college students can relate to that. It's just, good time management and balancing and discipline, and I was lucky enough to have high school coaches that had helped me learn to do that in the previous years. Moving into the individual versus team sports, when I went to Slippery Rock, it was for volleyball. The coach that I wanted to go play for ended up getting a better job somewhere else, and I was introduced to rugby and judo and fell in love with both of those. I had dated a wrestler forever, had no idea the courage it took to go out there and fight by yourself. I learned so much through the individual sports that I can still relate to coaching and help people have not only personal goals, but, collaborative goals too. The teamwork versus your self-accountability, responsibility, all that. So they both really helped a lot. When I listen to you, you make me question my life decisions because Coach Lambert was, I was a judo, but it became, Coach Lambert. He was also one of my favorite when I was trying to pick one. And my love was rugby, but he'd wanted me to fight because he'd see me, in my classes. So I went out and did well and got very fortunate. I was light, and I'd been fighting somebody 50 pounds heavier most of my life. So I got to go on and win nice medals up at West Point for the national championship and got invited to the Olympic Training Center in '88. I chose family, dog, and rugby. But I was that's the impact team sports has had on me. I couldn't imagine the courage it took to do the individual sport, but I loved sharing all that. That was just that's what I got addicted to, was the teamwork, the friendships, and I loved the sport. And so that's, I think they both offer something very special that helps teach life lessons. They might be a little different, but in the end, it all comes back to resilience and perseverance and, integrity and all that.
Yeah, that's great. Alfreeda, you would have had a similar situation coaching track and field, where you're coaching individual athletes who are part of a team. Anything that Teresa said that kind of resonates with you?
Oh, definitely. I'm not going to tell stories because a couple of my former track athletes are here and my trainers, but it builds a family relationship when you're coaching. Individual sports are awesome because you still are part of a team, but it's you against the clock or you against the tape measure. I never had any desire to coach team sports because I like the individual, taking someone and seeing them develop into a top quarter mile or a half mile or what have you, or smart enough to hire a coach who knew more than I did for events, because I was the head coach, the sprint coach. Just the memories that you get from the time you recruit them, the time you bring them on campus, the time you talk to their parents, all of that is a family. And today, when I had a meeting with 3 of my former athletes in Baltimore last weekend, and what they talked about was the time they spent riding on the road in the van and, being close, and 4 girls in the one room because we couldn't give everybody a room, when you traveled. Remember, this is the 70s, and early 80s. But they said we wouldn't have traded it for anything because of the closeness, and they remain close. They talk to each other. And then, having a son who got involved in sports, and he ran a little bit of track, and I mean little bit, because he said, Mom, he was good enough, Jesse Owens, I don't know if you guys, Jesse Owens, and had the Jesse Owens games for kids, right? Mm-hmm. So he had qualified for the regional championships of Western Pennsylvania in the 50, because he was like 8 years old. But I had him training as if he was going to run 100. And he said, Ma, I'm only running 50 yards. What's with this, me having to run around the track and all that? So I think I sort of discouraged him until he was a senior in high school, and then he liked to do the relays because he was a nice half miler but didn't want to do it by himself, competitive. But I digress. But yes, it just builds good character, independence. I watched Suzie, and I keep telling everybody, she and her sister got away from us, but we got the baby girl to come to Pitt when I was there. I wasn't the basketball coach, I was only the track coach, but back then, when you recruited students to the campus, you introduced everybody to the family. And that's what I loved about coaching track and watching them develop. And I had a quarter miler who ran in the Pan Am Games. She set many records. For a long time, the records that were at the Pitt track for women were all of my athletes who had started the program. I had an example, a young lady who came to me my second year as the head coach. She'd already cleared 6 foot as a high jumper. Now think about that. And she was a Pan Am champion. I had state champions, and we were lucky. I don't know how much any of you know about AIAW. Those of you around my age, you probably know a lot, but you could coach a high school program and coach a college team. So that was definitely a recruiting advantage. And so I recruited right out of Western Pennsylvania. I didn't have to go far. And just that atmosphere that we developed helped develop anyone who went through my program and finished the program, they got their degree. I didn't have to worry about watching, do they go to school, do they do classes, are they in trouble? No, those young ladies were grateful for a scholarship and the opportunity to compete and to get a degree. I think sometimes today's kids don't have that same attitude, and that's sad, because at the end of the day, without that degree, without that competition, how are you growing, you know? And I always said, I want you to be better than you were when you leave me. And it wasn't all me, it was also the teammates.
Suzie, it seems like a perfect segue to talk about the McConnell family.
Oh, boy.
When you talk about basketball in Western Pennsylvania, and that name is synonymous with basketball at every level, and now the next generation. What's the secret? And what can we learn from your family that kind of transitions to other athletes or other that people can take away from your family
Well, since
story?
my sister Kathy just walked in, I'll give her all the credit.
Yeah.
I just think, you know, we were, like Caroline, we grew up in a big family. There were 8 of us. And every Sunday we lived in a gym throughout the week. We went to practices. Grew up watching my older brothers. I was a little tomboy, a little tag along. And so we all played. And so as we grew up, the opportunities just continued to playing AAU basketball, played high school, had the opportunity to play in college. And then all of us went on to play, most of us went to play in college. And then once we were all married, somehow my brother started us not only playing basketball, but my brother Tommy was the first college coach in our family. And then my brother Tim, and then myself and Kathy. I do have a brother who we say went to the dark side. He's an official. So so anytime we have a question or we have a video, we film a thing on TV, or I can't wait. They show them the film of the WNBA's Game 5, the finals. I want his take on whether it was a foul or not. But I think then we all started having children, and then our kids grew up in the gym. I mean, they were travel babies. I know we have, you know, all these young people have their kids in bed at 7 o'clock. They sleep through the night. They do this well. Our kids weren't in bed until midnight because they were in a gym probably every night, not only at our games, but they were at my sister's games, my brother's games, and then they started all playing. So then we were just watching their cousins play. So I just think it was in our family, and I think if you didn't play basketball, we did have a couple hockey players. But if you didn't play basketball, you felt like you were missing something. So I think it was just a work ethic that we learned at a very young age, and I think it was something very visible for each of all of our kids to watch as well. And with us coaching, they just grew up in a gym from the day they were born. But I just think when you can look at, you know, things that can happen, my nephew's with the Indiana Pacers. He was doubted. He's 6 foot, 6'1", and people doubted him his whole career. You know, I look at myself. I'm 5'4". People doubted me my entire career, and I think the kids just look at that. They're never told they can't do something. You know, when you surround yourself with good people, whether it's family, whether it's coaches. I've been fortunate to play for some great coaches. Played with some great players, and I think when you have people that believe in you and people that you trust, and they help guide you in the right direction, I think it makes a difference.
Caroline, as our youngest panelist, you've experienced a completely changed landscape in athletics, both as an athlete, as an entrepreneur. But your business is predicated on the understanding that while Title IX has greatly impacted opportunity for female athletes, it hasn't guaranteed equity. What do you see as the biggest challenges for women athletes in women's sports today?
Ooh, that's a good question, Ann. Honestly, I think the challenges are pretty similar to what they were 50 years ago. All that to say, we certainly have made a lot of progress, and that progress is thanks to mostly women who have trailblazed a path for this to happen. However, we still have a really long way to go. I think Billie Jean King wrote a book that's literally called "We Have Come a Long Way, but we have a long way to go." So if you look at some of the gender gaps that exist still in professional sports today, women's sports get 5% of TV and traditional media coverage. They get 1% of global sponsorship dollars. Let's talk about the pay gaps for a quick second. So Caitlin Clark, #1 draft in the WNBA, her rookie salary is about $76,000 for her first year. The #1 draft in the NBA, Victor Wembanyama, his rookie salary was $12.1 million. And the WNBA is the highest paid professional women's sports league in the US. So if that's the top of the mountain, it's not a great scene across the rest of the professional women's sports landscape. So the gaps are really wide. As far as the biggest challenge, I think all of those gaps exist because of a lack of resources that we have in the women's sports space. There's a player in the National Women's Soccer League named Midge Purse, and she says this all the time, that look what women's sports have been able to do without resources. Like imagine, she says, I think the analogy she uses is a flower. Women's sports have bloomed despite having sunlight, water, and soil. So if we were able to have resources like media coverage and investment into teams and medical support for our players, where could we be? So I think the lack of resources is still the biggest challenge, and that's across the board in every facet of women's sports.
Thank you. Alfreeda, can you talk the same thing? I mean, in your 40-plus year career at the collegiate level, you saw a lot of change, but there's also a ways to go. What do you think the biggest challenges are today in intercollegiate athletics?
The money, the NIL. I'm not against NIL, but I'm against how it's being enforced. It's ruining college athletics. Transfer portal, the kids are going like it's a big sale, which it actually is. Because if Susie's playing at Penn State and her NIL money is $1 million, but I'm at, let's say, Villanova, and I can give her $2.1 million, where do you think she's going to go most likely, unless she's truly embraced in, I'm loyal to this program? The kids feel entitled, something that I don't think Suzie felt when she was being recruited. I don't think I see Jennifer Bruce sit in the back when she was being recruited, but our kids feel entitled, and that comes from we give, and we're actually buying our student athletes now. And that to me is the biggest challenge, and I think it will break down. Now, the big guys, they're always going to have the money, but the small schools like a Point Park, a Robert Morris, can they survive? Because their best athletes are being taken away. Not all of them, but their very best, their #1 recruit, they're being taken away because they're being promised more NIL money. And I think Nick Saban said it the best. He retired because he didn't want to have to recruit his athletes twice. Once to come to Alabama, and the second time for them to stay at Alabama. And I don't know how much you follow, basketball at Virginia. Their coach just walked away on the men's side, Tony Bennett. He goes, I'm just too old school to deal with this. And so I can't be half in and half out, so I got to leave. So we find more and more coaches are starting to leave, our senior coaches, we're finding more and more administrators. And that's my biggest fear, is that money is actually going to kill the programs that don't have the money. So the Power 5, which is now the Power 4, they may be running all the big time, because you don't see the Robert Morses on TV, do we? But we sure see a lot of Ohio State and Northwestern, and I'm not knocking those guys because they've got the money, they have what they need. If you look at the money disparaging, it is example, the Big Ten 2 years ago gave, now listen to this, each one of their member institutions $29 million. And that was just their TV money. Then you start adding the money they get for the number of teams that are in the NCAA tournament and the bowl games. I mean, and we give our student athletes so much money even before NIL, but people don't know that. Special assistance funds, for the student athletes who might have an emergency but don't have the money for that emergency. The Pell money. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And I'm saying, eventually, we won't be able to keep this up. It's called the arms race. And we're seeing athletes being left behind, like schools are going down from Division I to Division III. We've never heard of that when we were coming up, but that's where we're at. So to me, that's the biggest fear.
Yeah. Teresa, you've spent 20 years as a female coach and owner of a professional football team and had great success with the Passion, but I know the road hasn't been easy. How have you built and sustained this team? What factors are critical to the success of women's professional franchises today?
I think that we were blessed to be in a city where there was so much support. You know, there's so many of the players here, and it's, you know, John and Deborah and Dana to be here. The support that, you know, the Harris family with Franco and Dana bringing all the respect and legitimacy to it so people would open their eyes. But we were one of the few teams across America, like, you can't just rise by yourself. You have to do it together to get the respect and build a franchise that's going to be worth within the league. And, you know, Caroline nailed it. It's if we had that answer, we would know now, but the resources, what we've done with so little, I hear talking about back in the day, we are still putting, you know, 4 people in a room. We are still trying to figure out. It's just, the money has been a challenge. We've been blessed because of our friendships here. But so many of the teams, you work all year to make the playoffs, and you're like, oh, you got to fly to California, and they have to decide, you know, does this cost me my job? And are we going to have to forfeit, or playing with half a team? And even our players that are here, you've broke so many boundaries, and it's because of where we are. I will give them the majority of the credit, because we have stuck together and managed to take a tough situation. It has never been me alone. It's been the co-ownership and the women that I've been surrounded with that just wouldn't quit and wouldn't give up, because I know personally I never would have made it without the people I surrounded myself with, and that we are lucky within Pittsburgh to have a different type of support than many of the cities have.
Caroline, you've been involved with raising sponsorship dollars for the Passion, in advising the Riverhounds on bringing a women's team, the Riveters, to Pittsburgh, on exploring a women's professional hockey team in Pittsburgh. A couple of things. First, tell me how you conceived of the business you built. It seems like you've been very much in the right place at the right time, but I know a great deal of strategic thought went into that decision. Did you imagine that what we're seeing today would happen so quickly?
Ooh, 2 good questions. I'll start with the first one. How did I conceive my business? So I had the idea to start Goals while I was the senior vice president of partnerships at P3R in the Dick's Sporting Goods Pittsburgh Marathon. Ever since I was that 6-year-old girl on the baseball field, I did have that idea that I wanted to do something in my life at the intersection of sports and business and feminism. And so I put myself on a career path to hopefully one day lead me to that. Worked a lot of amazing jobs for Kohl's department stores, for the Heinz History Center, plug. And like I said, at the Dick's Sporting Goods Pittsburgh Marathon. And it was in 2020, which, to paint the picture for you, that's the height of the global pandemic. And something interesting happened in respect to women's sports during the pandemic, in that they became more accessible than ever before to watch. So this funny thing happened. Sports shut down, and networks and broadcasters were like, oh my gosh, we don't have sports to put on TV. And women's sports, namely the WNBA and the NWSL, were 2 of the first leagues, Athletes Unlimited included, to figure out how to play safely in bubbles during the pandemic. So broadcasters were like, oh my gosh, we don't care if it's women, let's just put them on TV, we need sports content. So you were able to sit down and watch a full WNBA season on TV, probably for the first time in history, which is a big deal. So I was one of those people that sat down and watched that season, and I was absolutely blown away by what the women of the WNBA impacted, both on and off the court that season. They dedicated the whole season to fighting for racial and social justice while they were still playing the best basketball in the world during a global pandemic. Many of them had their children with them in the bubble. I was just like, this is incredible. I want to learn more about what's happening here. And I dug into it, and I was noticing that business results for the WNBA were just up and to the right. Sponsorship sales were up, viewership was up. Who knows the WNBA orange hoodie? That was when that kind of went off. Everybody was wearing that hoodie. I was like, this is really interesting. I want to learn more about this. And I was going for a lot of walks, and I started scrolling through Spotify trying to listen to some podcasts about this while I was walking, and I couldn't find any podcast that talked about the business side of women's sports or any that talked about the gender gaps that exist in professional sports. And I thought that was a huge red flag in 2020. There were dozens of podcasts with men talking about the business of men's sports, and I was just like, this is ridiculous. I'm going to try to start a podcast. I had never podcasted before. I didn't know how to do it, but I was like, this is going to be my work from home COVID hobby. I'm not going to watch Tiger King or make banana bread or sourdough starter. I'm going to try to start a podcast. So I just did. And my team at P3R was very supportive the whole time. They were like, yeah, do this thing. And so I started this podcast, and after having conversations with leaders from across the women's sports industry to come on, and my podcast is called The Business Case for Women's Sports. So I brought them on to make the business case for why we need more resources into women's sports. And my business plan kind of came to me. I was like, I can sell sponsorships, I can do marketing, maybe I can help support the women's sports industry. So, you know, it just, what's the quote? Like, never underestimate the power of a pissed off woman. I think that's kind of how the podcast started, and then it kind of went from there. So that's how I conceived the business, and it certainly evolved 4 years in to shift to the needs of the women's sports industry. And then what was the second part of your question? Am I surprised by how quickly this is?
Let's jump to a question about Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And what's going on here. Is this the right market for women's professional sports?
Yes.
Why not?
Yeah, of course. Pittsburgh, I don't think we can claim to be the greatest sports town in the world if we are not supporting women's sports in the biggest way possible. Right. You know, the Pittsburgh Passion has been holding it down for long enough. We need more professional women's sports here. And it's exciting to, yeah. Thank you. Thanks, T. Thank you, Dana. You know, it's been incredible what the Passion have done, and now we get to see organizations like the Riverhounds step up, and they're bringing women's soccer to Pittsburgh with the Riveters. We have some of their team here tonight. I don't know where Mallory and the team are. Hi. It's incredible. And then the Pittsburgh Penguins, Kevin Acklin has said with his full chest that he wants to bring a professional women's ice hockey team here to Pittsburgh, which is incredible. So I just think it's a matter of time. I think we tested last year. We brought a neutral site professional women's hockey league game to Pittsburgh, and we had 9,000 people come out to that game on a Sunday afternoon, and it was a matchup between Toronto and Montreal. Well, imagine if we had a Pittsburgh team. Everybody would be there. So I think it's absolutely time, and we're ready, and I think this market is just ready to embrace women's sports in a huge way.
Definitely.
Great. So that sort of leads me to my next question. All this changed, even though we talked about what's missing, the resources that are needed, the road we still have to travel, but there has been a real sea change. It seems like it's happened overnight, and I think that's partly the Caitlin Clark effect, that you see this very publicly, this interest rise. But we know it's been 50 plus years since Title IX was enacted. So for all of you, what systems need to be in place or elements had to be in place to bring about the change that we're seeing now? Because we know this has been a long road to get to where we are now. So what were the key building blocks to make it happen?
Rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah.
Go ahead, you can start.
Go ahead, T.
Okay, we'll roll down. I think I would probably say that social media helped level out because it cost so much money to get the, things televised, the productions and all that. So I think social media definitely would be my answer. I know all four of us are answering, so I'll leave it at that.
I think the fathers who had daughters wanted the same experience for their daughters as their sons were getting. Seriously. I truly believe that because, they say the fathers are, behind their sons, but I know my two granddaughters, their father is 100% behind each of them with what they did. And I see more and more fathers at girls' gymnastics and swimming and football, any sport. So I really think that the men have helped raise us up, but I also think that the value of women in sports has grown tremendously, and people are starting to realize this is a good product that we can put forward and I can make some money. So I think that has helped this grow as quickly as it has grown.
I would agree with Teresa that social media played a big part in the rise, especially of women's basketball. When you look at the NIL stuff, that these players can now self-promote. Every time, I don't even have TikTok. That's all I hear about is TikTok. And these players that self-promote, they're out there getting their own NIL deals. And I think with the Caitlin Clark effect, especially with women's basketball, it is real. I mean, what she has done for women's basketball has been tremendous. They didn't have chartered flights in the WNBA until her first exhibition game, when she was walking through an airport and just, drew all the attention. No one has done it before her. All the great players that have been in the league have tried. But it's all over social media because people are filming them walking through the airport, so now they're very, very visible. What she did in college, and she elevated the game at the collegiate level, and now she's in the WNBA. She's definitely elevated it, and I've definitely seen it in women's basketball, but that's the sport that I obviously pay most attention to. But social media on any platform, I think, is the biggest thing, because you can go on any platform and you can find games now, women's basketball games, any other women's sports. You can find them on YouTube. You can find them on people's websites, and now everyone is more visible. And I think when you have the great athletes that are coming up, I think the games are changing. I think these athletes are so much better. They're faster, they're more physical. They're training harder. I just think every sport has been elevated, and I think they're becoming more visible because of the platforms that they can be seen on.
Yeah, retweet. I would also say social media, hence my retweet joke. And I'll say that, so I mentioned earlier that 5% of traditional and linear TV coverage goes to women's sports. When you look at the full share of media coverage for women's sports, though, it's 15% of that pie, and that's because of social and emerging media. So social media has democratized media coverage for women's sports, so now we can get it out there more because we can take it into our own hands and have social media platforms. I was able to start my business because of social media, and we get 2 million people engaging with our content every single month. So it's amazing. I love to give the example too of, do you remember the NCAA weight room debacles a couple years ago, 2001?
Yep.
How could we forget?
Exactly.
It's burned into our brains. So the men, in case anybody's not familiar, for men's March Madness, there was a picture that went viral of they got this fully blown weight room facility, bigger than this room that we're in right now. And then a picture of the women's weight room went viral, and it was a stack of dumbbells and a couple yoga mats. Mm-hmm. And social media took that absolutely viral, and what that led to was a gender equity review by the NCAA, which led to increased investment into women's basketball, better media rights deals, everything across the board. I don't know, and this might be controversial, I don't know if we would know who Caitlin Clark is today if that didn't happen. I really believe that. If we didn't have those platforms in place to make Caitlin's star shine as brightly as it is, I don't know if we would be as far as we are today if we didn't have platforms for Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso and all those athletes to be able to be this incredible class of rookies in the WNBA. And I know we're doing a lot of basketball talk up here, but I really do. I double down on that. I think social media has been a game changer. But Anne, I also like Title IX. I don't think people talk about Title IX enough. We now have 5 generations of women and girls who have the opportunity to play sports and see women at the highest levels in sports. What's happening right now doesn't happen if we didn't have Title IX enacted 52 years ago.
And you don't have a Caitlin Clark if there's not a system in place for her to play basketball as soon as she wants to do it, the resources for her to advance at every level and to have the opportunity to achieve her full potential. So I do think there has been that pipeline that's developed that provides, not everything, but provides a system that can train the best to be the best.
That's right.
All right, I'm going to open it up to all of you to just address a couple of key concepts that we may not have touched on so far. The first one is balance. Craig and I were talking about earlier, my colleague in the Sports Museum, one of my favorite photos of all times is that photo of you, Suzie, leaving the Rockers game, carrying your child, holding your husband's hand. This is the same time you're coaching at Oakland Catholic. You're a mother, you're playing professional basketball, you're a wife. How did you find balance to do that then, and how do all of you find the balance in your lives between your professional and your personal lives?
I'm not sure what I was thinking.
And that
Is what
sums
I'm
it up.
thinking right now. That was at a crazy time because the WNBA did not exist until 1997, and I was already married. It was 1997. I was holding my newborn child, my youngest, and watching the WNBA on TV, envious of the opportunities players are getting that was never there. I didn't want to go overseas to make $12,000 back then as a small point guard. It really wasn't worth it to me, so I retired. But then the WNBA came along, and my husband looked at me and said, "Why don't you try out and play?" And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, I'm holding my fourth child. So I was serving. I was completely out of shape. I didn't train during any of those years that I was having kids. But I was serving on a USA basketball committee. And Renee Brown, who was the director of player personnel for the WNBA, was talking about the WNBA and the players and how it was all going. And the conversation we had, I came home from that meeting and I started training while I was coaching at Oakland Catholic, taking care of 4 children. So got the ball rolling, and I started looking into it. I trained for that next year, and then when I was drafted to the Cleveland Rockers, it was the best thing that ever happened. To be able to play professional basketball was unbelievable, but I could not have done it without my husband, who was a teacher, so he was off during the summer, and he would help take care of our kids. And it was funny, we just talked about this with my mom the other day with our kids. My girls don't even remember this, but my mother moved into my home in April when I left for training camp until my husband was done teaching in June. So my mother basically helped raise my girls, my 4 kids, but my son was a little older. But it took a village. I mean, for me to train, for me to work out, my sisters would watch my kids, my parents. We had tons of babysitters. It was nice. I was coaching at Oakland Catholic, so I had 20 babysitters built in. So, anytime I needed them. But it was just, back then, we just did what we did. It was a passion of mine. It was an opportunity that I wanted to take advantage of. I wanted to pursue. And I was very, very fortunate because of my family and the people that were around me.
Wow.
And then I had a brother, Timbo, some of you may know, who trained me. We fought half the time and loved each other the other time, but he's the one who helped train me to get back in shape to be able to play in the '92 Olympics and then also for the WNBA, so I owe him a great deal as well.
Anybody else want to take that one on? Or
I have to agree. I was a widow at age 29 with a 4-year-old. And I did not remarry, but my parents, my family, my friends, anyone that I could call on would say, "Yeah, we'll babysit Anton. We'll make sure he gets home from basketball practice before he and Mike Tormer started driving." But it was the family, and I totally agree that without that family network, and they don't have to be your blood family. I bet all of you who have experienced something in sports, it was because of an aunt, uncle, the neighbor next door, parents getting you back and forth, your friends' parents. So I really think it's a family career from the time you start until the time you retire, and even after that.
I'd like to share as well because I listened to those, and I'm so glad you asked that question because it does take the family. I found football at 38. I was a high school health and phys ed teacher and a varsity coach up in Edinburgh. It was when we first started the team in 2002. That was the winter of the century, the snowstorm of the century or whatever we had. But I was traveling 3 hours down, a 3-hour outdoor practice, 3 hours back. You couldn't feel your fingers. I mean, it really. My mom, at 38 years old, I had my mom in the car half the time because I couldn't keep my eyes open. I would get home at 3 in the morning, and I'd be up at 6 teaching. Mm-hmm. And so my parents helped me. They helped with the concession stands for 22 years. It was that balance. It actually got to the point where I couldn't continue to teach and coach. I had to choose between, am I going to continue this career, which I loved, the teaching and coaching, but very faith-based. I felt like God said, you have a bigger stage. I didn't know anybody in Pittsburgh, and I was a country girl that didn't know if I'd ever move anywhere near a city. I mean, I was showing up at practices. If any of you are young and have never read an atlas or had a map that was, all right, picture coming from dirt roads to you don't have a cell phone, you don't have navigation in the car, and you're trying to find the smallest, crappiest field in Pittsburgh in some park that's not on the map. That's where we practiced. And I know we've got Kim and Lisa back there and some of the ones that have been around for 22 years. I'm going to segue into this because we talked about would have Caitlin been that star? We've had some of the best athletes back there.
Yeah.
Kim played 20 years. Lisa led as our quarterback to 3 undefeated national championships. And a lot of you might not even know who she was. But in the men's world, she would have been Peyton Manning. That was, Tom, I'm telling you.
Give her a round of applause.
Lisa Horton.
But the opportunities that everybody up here, because of what you've all done and strive for and what you've continued to give out, if you're one of the young ones in the room, I continue to pass it on, make it better, and I thank you, for being here and supporting.
So how about a question about meaning? What has athletics meant to you in your life? Do sports provide girls and women with unique opportunities they can't get anywhere else?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, Caroline.
Yeah. I know I'm doing this work today because of the profound impact that playing sports has had on me. Not as an athlete, of course, as an athlete, but as a person. We know that there is a direct connection between girls playing sports becoming women who lead. There's a stat that 94% of women who hold C-suite positions, executive positions at Fortune 500 companies, they all played sports growing up. There's countless studies that prove that you learn all those values from playing sports that translate into leadership skills. So in general, if we can get more girls playing sports, we can create more women leaders in our society. So I think it is just absolutely essential. Yeah, we talk all the time about how it's just good business and it's the right thing to do to invest in women. But we're going to make our society a better place if we can create more opportunities for girls to play sports. So that's why I do this work. It's had an impact on me and it's had an impact on so many.
And I don't think I could be behind the mic without giving this speech that every player in here could give for me. But, when you talked about what the NIL has been doing too, when high school and collegiate sports started, it was to teach those life lessons, respect, accountability, integrity, and all the things that we all gain from knowing sacrifice and hard work, and loyalty. I mean, all the traits that will make us a better team, whether you're a family team or a company or a sports team, it's the same traits that I just mentioned, hard work, integrity, sacrifice, the things that keep your family together. And I feel like those are the lessons we could gain from this. And yet we're setting up some systems, as you explained very well earlier, that I believe take away from that family, that loyalty and all of that. So, I feel like it has changed my life and probably every athlete in this room. I hope you use those lessons to get through the tough times, whether it's, disease, divorce, or just a struggle of any type in life. I think what you learn by, in football, you have to surround yourself with the right people. Pick the person up beside you. You got the next one. You talked earlier, Caroline, about belief. Somebody believed in you. Get around the people that are going to build you, believe in you, and not let you quit, not let you give up. They give you the grace to mess up and still be a place to belong. Some of the players on our team were very large girls and had it, they were our heroes. They were our O-line. But in high school and college, maybe never even got to be put on a jersey and be a part of something. And I could go on for hours, as everybody knows, but I believe in what it offers in life.
We joke all the time that we grew up at the wrong time because of how much players are making now and the opportunities that they're being given. But I wouldn't trade the time that I grew up for anything. We didn't have cell phones. We played outside. We did everything that you're supposed to do as a kid. But also, what you're seeing now is you're seeing so many more athletes become single sport athletes, and they're just focusing on one sport. And I think that is leading to a lot of injuries that you have, the overuse injuries with the ACLs and different injuries that athletes are experiencing. Because when we grew up, we went from volleyball to basketball to softball. And then you did other things in the summer, but it's every sport now, I feel, is dictating that athletes have to choose because it's a year-round, whether it's club volleyball, club soccer, AAU basketball. So you would love to see these players experiencing some of those things in, the life lessons that you have. You're playing with different players, different athletes at different sports at a young age, and, some people aren't even finding what they're best at doing because they are specializing at such a young age, because these parents are now seeing dollar signs. They're seeing the scholarship. They're seeing that they can get their education paid for. Now that's all the other stuff that is going on at the collegiate level. So I wouldn't trade it for anything, but I think there are so many life lessons for young people to learn, and it doesn't matter if you're the best player on the team or the last player on the team. There are lessons that you learn that carry with you throughout the rest of your life.
I ditto. But
Retweet, Caroline says
Yeah,
retweet.
you can tell the age difference. She's tweeting. I'm doing air quotes, right? I just think that sports for me, I know what it's done for me, and I wasn't an athlete per se, but as a coach, it taught me courage. It made me feel that I could do almost anything, but I had to work. Nothing was going to be given to me. So work ethic. I was able to become a leader because I had examples of leaders who were around me. I think that no matter what you do in life, you be a champion for what you're trying to do. You know, not everybody's going to be a LeBron James. Not everybody's going to be a Tony Dorsett or Brady or,
Suzie, you meant to say.
Suzie, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I was going to say Caitlin Clark.
Caitlin Clark, Simone Biles. I mean, we can go on and on and on. Serena Williams, these great, great athletes. But you can still be a great person. You don't have to be a great athlete. Be a great person. And let that be your legacy. And I think you get that when you're a student athlete, when you're in college, hopefully when you're professional. Sometimes I wonder, when every time I pick up the paper, another one's getting arrested for assault, But life lessons don't stop when you're 25. I always tell people, when I stop learning, then it's time to throw the dirt on me. I try to learn something different every day. For me, it's trying to understand this generation, what they're going through. Seriously.
Yeah.
I have 2 teenage granddaughters, and they do TikTok, they do Instagram, they do everything. So I finally said, okay, set me up some accounts, because I want to see what all this is about. Because if I don't understand their world, how can I help them? And as parents, we're like, oh, that's good for them. Well, maybe it isn't, and maybe it is, I laughed that, when we got internet, wow, it's a new way of connecting with one another. Well, the internet is like all over the world now. It's not new, but I just think sports gives us so much to become good human beings. And if you're a good human being, you can't ask for anything more than that, because if you're a good human being, you're going to do good things. And we have great examples of that from people who come through sports. And all of you athletes out there, continue to do that. Those of you who are former athletes, I hope the lessons you learned, you're passing on to your children, to your neighbors' kids. You're giving back. Because if we don't give back, who's going to help the next generation? So I'm looking to you to be coming up here at some time and sitting in this seat talking about your life experiences and how you made a difference for not just one life, but many lives. Can I just take a moment? Because as I look out there, I see so many people who I love, who are part of my team. I'd like you guys to stand, because I want to publicly thank you. If you were an East Allegheny High School student, stand up, Bagaisky Sisters. Mike Torma, East Allegheny High School. Anita Speranzo. Where's Joni Mazur at? And Dee Shaw at Shaw. Okay, these were my trainers. These were my trainers. So I owe a lot to these individuals, because without them, I don't get to do. If they don't keep my athletes healthy, if Mike and my son don't play good basketball and they form a lifetime legacy, And the Bagaisky sisters were part of the family. And Anita was one of my captains on the track team. And just for them to come out and say, we weren't going to miss this, you can't give me a better, this is what she lived for. This is what she wanted to do, because they are all successful individuals. And I'm sorry, I sort of stole
Perfect
that.
segue, though, because I want to ask, you're all at different points in your life and career. I want to give the audience a chance to ask some questions, but talk about your legacy. What are you proudest of, or what do you see as your major contribution? It's hard for you, Caroline, I know.
I'm still working. I think we're all still working on it. I don't know. Just trying to leave women's sports better than I found it. Be part of the change.
Yeah.
I just think having coached, having played, maybe you've inspired someone who's maybe a short little girl trying to play basketball. Maybe that motivates her. The players that I've coached at every level, maybe that you've just impacted them in some way.
For me, it's what I just had. For me, I just had those people stand. To see them be great human beings, that's my legacy.
Yeah, and now I'll do the ditto quotes, but yeah, I think that, I would, whether we won a game or did not, I would hope that if they were talking about me, they'd be like, well, she wanted to create an environment where everybody had to, I always consider us a melting pot, because it's not a college team or a high school team. We have 18-year-olds and 50-some-year-olds, and, every walk of life, every difference that you could name in the world right now, we come together and work together. And that's always been like the most important thing, because if we could get that right, and if the world could get that right, so that's something that I thank the girls for, because I can't just have a wish. They make it happen. So I'm blessed for the right, folks in our corner, whether it's the ownership or the our staff that comes. I even see people that have been helping and volunteering for years, and the players. But coming together and doing that is what I've always hoped that I would see. And when I talk to some of the old high school girls that I see, I know how touched you are, because I got called back to the high school. I mean, it means a lot.
It does.
So kudos to all of you that are here supporting. It means a lot.
Thank you. So first, let's thank our incredible panel: Caroline, Suzie, Alfreeda, Teresa. And then I think...
Great job. You were really good. Really good in front of the microphone.
I told each of them I could do an hour with each of them. They're so incredible. But I know Jess has a microphone. If people have questions in the audience you'd like to ask, just raise your hand and she'll bring it over to you, and we'll get some questions from you guys.
Okay, as a mediocre athlete, I didn't ever expect to go pro or anything, but I wanted to work in sports. So what advice would you give to women trying to break into the corporate side of sports instead of playing professionally?
Can you please first identify yourself and talk about the good work you're doing in women's sports right now?
My name is Adeline Nicholson. I'm the manager of social and content for Athletes Unlimited. So I work with pro athletes.
It's fantastic.
So she's already in the game.
Advice, Caroline?
Oh,
That was a question.
I guess I'm first. Sorry, I put you on the spot, but you're doing a great job right now. In terms of social media coverage for elevating women's sports, if you are interested in professional women's volleyball, lacrosse, softball, or off-season WNBA basketball, follow Athletes Unlimited. This is the person behind it, so good job. Advice, I don't know. I'm going to give a quote. This is the wrong room to ask this question to. Have you seen A League of Their Own? Yeah, okay. This is hard work that we're doing. And so to quote Jimmy Dugan, it's the hard, what is it? The hard that makes it great. If it wasn't hard, everybody would do it. I botched it a little bit, but it's really hard. I would just encourage people looking to change the women's sports landscape to keep showing up, because it is changing. And every single time that we show up and do something like this, every time you show up and attend a discussion like this, every time you like something on social media, it's contributing to a whole landslide of change. So just keep showing up.
Thank you. Other questions?
Hello. Thank you guys, by the way. My first question would be for Teresa, actually. A couple years ago, I'm a freelance writer. Antonio Rossetti is my name, by the way. But just so I don't get called out. But anyways, my question would be, a couple years ago, I wrote an article about a flag football team, Star Rox's flag football team. One of your players coached them. I was just going to ask, they didn't have a lot of teams at first, but now there's like a bunch of teams that are playing flag football. Just tell me a little bit about the impact your players have had on that league.
Well, I probably should be calling Goose up here to answer this, but we've had, I think there was 12 teams around, and I believe that at one point we had 9 of our players that went on to be coaches for it. So it's fun to watch the ripple effect, because I love showing up in the sidelines, and they'll grin and they'll see me there, and they'll say something that, you know, I probably repeated after my high school coach. It's meaningful like that, but I feel like the ripple effect is going. They're getting out there. You know, so I love to see that. I think I have a question. I'm not going to pass up a coaching recruiting moment. If any of you would like to play for the Pittsburgh Passion. There it is. But thank you for shining a spotlight on them, and I appreciate what you're doing. True statement.
Are there other questions?
That's funny.
Oh, wait, I got you.
Oh, okay.
When you were playing with the Rockers, did you know the impact you would have now? Did you realize when you were playing? Because I want to share. I was one of the intern rebounders for you. So I worked my ass off every day. So, you know, you're one of my heroes. So was Mia Hamm and what have you, but I was an intern with Georgia Fisher. That was my intro to women's sports and on a professional level. So my question is, did you know the impact you'd have now?
No, but you know how important you were to us?
Hey, I try.
You got us ready to play the games. I don't think as an athlete growing up playing sports, you ever think about an impact you'll have on anyone. It's just for the love of the game. You know, whoever I played for, it doesn't matter if I played pickup. I was competitive and I wanted to win. But I just you don't really think about influencing anyone or having an impact. And I think as you get older and I've gotten into coaching, I think that's when I started to realize that I had an opportunity to help these young athletes not just become basketball players at another level, even though you talk about what their dreams are, what they aspire to be, and you try to help them navigate that. But I think I just try to live my life the right way, the way I've been brought up, the values that my parents instilled in all of us growing up. So just doing things the right way, and hopefully I was a role model in a lot of ways, not just on the basketball court, but it's not something I thought of, but thank you though.
And for those of you that don't know who asked that question, if you're in this room, that was Lisa, our quarterback, and every year at the retreat, we got to hear her story about it. But you left it in.
We've had that conversation, but she was the best.
Are there other questions? Carol, do you mind if I ask you a question, even though you're in our audience tonight? You've seen a major change in golf in the course of your career, and we've talked a little bit about what's changed at the top and what needs to happen across the board. Can you just speak to that, if you don't mind?
Well, you're saying that I'm old, is that right?
No, I'm not. I'm saying you've had a long, storied career that you can reflect on.
I have been in the world of golf for a very long time, since the 1960s, really. And there have been tremendous changes in the game and in the world of sports. I've been trying to think of questions for the panel here, and actually I'm very worried about NIL. And I'm worried about a lot of athletes going forward and a lot of schools going forward. But I would actually have a question for the panel on whether you think anything can be done about that to rein in the big money schools, is the way I would describe it. But to get back to your question, in golf, I think women are making some strides in that area. There is a huge pay discrepancy, as we've said, as you guys have said. But there are strides being made. I think the juniors in this country are making some strides. The USGA is doing great things to try to create a national team which will lead to more American women making a splash on the LPGA tour. And I think that's important because I think a lot of us in this room would like to see more Americans up on the top of the leaderboards. And I think that would lead to more money advantage for the LPGA in this country. My whole career was as an amateur, so I was not into making money. I was very fortunate to be able to play golf for many years, being supported by my husband and the rest of my family, actually. But I think there's a lot to be said for amateurism, which leads back to the good things that you get in the sport, in any sport. So I'm kind of rambling here, but I am very interested in the game of golf and women's golf in particular, and I would like to see it advance. So, good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. I
And now you
appreciate
see Caitlin Clark is on the golf course.
Yeah.
The Pro-Am.
True, I saw that.
She's good too.
This is really kind of a curiosity question. We had the Olympics this past summer, and for 2 weeks, I watched like sports that I never watch except for every 4 years. You know, I mean everything from like fencing, but a lot of track that I don't, you don't see as much in the mainstream media. And I just wondered, in your opinion, does all the media presence that the Olympics gives to a variety of sports, women's sports in particular, does that have a long-lasting effect in how people view or how much people view some of the less mainstream sports?
Anyone?
I think so. I can take that in regard to track. I think anytime we can platform women athletes like they are platformed at the Olympics, that's a good thing, especially when that happens within an ecosystem where there's more money coming into women's sports. So this Olympics was absolutely transformational for women's sports in a lot of ways, specifically for track and field. So Serena Williams' husband, his name is Alexis Ohanian. He is the founder of Reddit. And he's a huge supporter of women's sports. He's invested in Angel City Football Club and the National Women's Soccer League. And he watched the Olympics this year, was blown away by the women athletes, and invested in a new first-of-its-kind women's track meet called Athlos that offered the biggest prize purses for women track and field athletes ever. So I think the fact that track and field got that platform within this ecosystem where there's more attention and more investment going into women's sports, it led to a big marquee event like Athlos to give women track and field athletes more opportunities. We're seeing a lot more, we're seeing it with basketball, new expansion leagues popping up. Nafisa Collier and Brianna Stewart, who just competed in the WNBA finals, they're launching a 3-on-3 women's basketball league that's starting this January. I don't know if that happens if we didn't have 3-on-3 basketball in the Olympics that had a platform in that way. So I think, for a long time, the Olympics is really what we had as far as women's sports media coverage. That was really the only way I was able to watch women's sports growing up, is when the Olympics came around every 2 and 4 years. So I think it's absolutely transformational, and I think now more than ever, when we can get women's sports on a global stage like the Olympics, it's just going to lead to more opportunities for women athletes and women in sports.
I want to say something. First of all, thank you very much for doing this. And I have to tell you, I just turned 80, and the group of people that mandated or took care of women's sports back in the day was DGWS, which was called Division of Girls and Women's Sports. And I played basketball when you had 3 girls on this side that were forwards and 3 that were guards, and no one was allowed to cross here. And I bounced, I dribbled twice, and I either had to shoot or pass. Eventually, the first year I was in college, we went to roving players where you had still 6, but 2 guards. 2 people were able to become guards and forwards, back and forth, back. And then eventually, when I was a little bit older and teaching, we went to the 5-player. I just want to say one thing about Caitlin Clark. I did my graduate work at the University of Iowa, and when I first went there, they were still playing 6-player.
They were the last school.
Wow.
You didn't cross the line. And basketball is an institution in Iowa. In Iowa City, one of my friends had sent me a picture. They had a 3-story building with Caitlin Clark shooting the ball, and 3 blocks down the street, there was the basketball hoop that she was shooting at. But my question, or my thing that I wanted to ask was, I really think women's sports do not get enough publicity, enough attention. I was saying, I go to the Pitt women's volleyball, and they're fantastic. If you have not been, you need to go and see them play one time, or watch them on television. Volleyball is an outstanding sport, but I thought if Sam Nover or John Fetko were still announcing, there would be more women's sports. It would be more in the forefront. But what do you think about what can we do to get more publicity for these women, for our women? Thank you.
Let the women run social media. Seriously. You know, for years the men ran it, and look what happened to their programs. But I'm serious. I encourage, you know, you talk about what you can do to enhance women's sports, bring to the forefront. If you're in communications, or if you know, I tell young people, there's a spot for everybody in sports. Not everybody has to be on the floor or on the field. You can be an announcer, and as we like to say, you can go to the dark side and be an official. But they get paid pretty good money now.
Yeah, they do.
They do. You know, you can be a writer, you can be the marketing person, you can be the fundraiser. So let's get women in those positions, because we still have men in those positions, and that's part of our problem. When I started coaching in 1975 at Pitt, 95% of the women's coaches in college athletics, the head coaches, were women. We were underpaid, and people didn't care because, quote unquote, the law said you had to have women's sports. And of course, everybody blamed, you know, if they cut the budget, they blamed the women's sports. Well, you took money away from the men to have the women. You know, we had to go through all of that. But what we also lost when we went to the NCAA, now it was a great thing for the NCAA to take over AIAW. See, and I'm in your age category, so I know all about these 6 people playing basketball. But when the NCAA decided we want to take over athletic programs for women, and that was in 1983, what happened was we lost our leadership because our women ADs now became assistant ADs. We lost the ability to pay coaches because now the men who were assistant coaches on the men's side saw this as an avenue to coach. And they weren't going to take the salaries that we were taking. I was blessed that at Pittsburgh, we did not have to worry about that. And I was very grateful to Kaz Myslinski, who was the athletic director at the time. He still had Sandy Bullman. He had empowered her to be a leader. He did not take that away from her. He offered the women who were coaches making a little bit of money to be the head coaches, and salaries bumped up. There are some good men out there, but I'll tell you what, ladies, we got to get women back into the coaching arena. That's the battle we're fighting right now. You know, I'm not against anybody making money, but I'll tell you what, women on the coaching side aren't making what the men on the coaching side are making. There's a big disparity. Everybody's like, well, Dawn Staley, she makes this amount, this million, and so, but what's Gino making up in UConn? You know. And I'm not knocking Gino because he is a good coach, but we have great women coaches, but we don't pay them what they should be paid, or we don't give them the opportunity to be paid what they're paid. So.
One last question.
Yes. Hi, my name's Amani Johnson. I'm Pittsburgh-ish native. I went to East Allegheny, actually, okay. And I played Division I basketball at Kennesaw State. But my question is, kind of going off of what you just said and what we've been talking about with the fathers and everything, what do you feel, or do you feel, is the, I guess, ethical responsibility of men in sports and just in general to, like, the NBA, for example, how much money they're making? Like, LeBron, why do you not own a WNBA team? Why are you not giving more to the WNBA? And maybe he is, and I don't know what he does, but, like, for example, in that case, like, what do you feel that men in these positions that are making 85 times what the women are making, do you feel they have a responsibility to put their money into women's sports, or it's their money, they earned it, do what they want? Just curious on anyone's opinion on that.
That's a great question, because Colby, rest in peace. He was one of those who felt women were important in sport, and not just because he had daughters, but because he just felt women athletes should get the same treatment as men. I can't speak for LeBron and his money, but it would be nice. But here again, those men are making millions and millions of dollars. And how many women do we have in sports or any fashion that make millions and millions of dollars and they can own teams? It's so I guess what we have to do is, you young people, you band together and make the change. Don't be afraid. Long time ago they said, when women interview for jobs and there's 10 bullet points for what they're looking for, women think they have to have all 10. A man can look at the same job, same 10, he's like, oh, I can do one of those, or I can do none of those, but I think I can qualify for that. We have to have that same attitude. I'm ready, I'm prepared, and I'm going after that job. And those of you, I don't know how many of you want to be coaches or are coaches that are women? How many of you have been coaches? Some of us who have retired? That's great. Usually when I ask that question, I might get 3 or 4 hands, but I forget, I'm in Pittsburgh. We know how to do it. We know how to do it.
I think I'd like to add just a little bit on, because I know that with the men supporting, I will say I would not leave here without saying how grateful for so many years of things that nobody ever knew. What Franco did here, he was one, when you're talking about some of the people you want to give a shout out to, he supported back way, they were called the powder cakes. Yeah. He was taking care of people and women, men, everything, the community, music, art, it didn't matter. But there are people out there that do that, the men and the women. We're grateful for them. Be one of those people when you make it. And the other part, the gap, there's a lot of distance between many, but I don't know that I know a larger inequality than the men tackle football team and the women's tackle football. There's a gap there that is incredibly wide. And if any of you happen to have radio or TV or newspaper contacts here, I mean, it really starts with somebody just backing us on the news. And, so if you have that type of influence, and to those of you that have written some stories for us, we appreciate it, because these women out there, I feel that they deserve it.
I just want to add too, Monty's a really good basketball player, everybody. I used to coach against her, and we did not like to play you. So thank you for your question. Thank you for being here. One thing I'm really, I have a lot of optimism for the growth of women's sports is we are starting to see men step up in a big way to get behind the whole movement. Mm-hmm. It's becoming more commonplace. We have Patrick Mahomes investing in the Kansas City Current and the NWSL. We're starting to see male athletes really coming to the forefront of the movement. I don't want to say forefront, but they're coming to support the movement. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big deal. Like, we're not going to solve this issue in a bubble. It's not the responsibility of just women to solve this problem. We need everybody to come to the table, and we're starting to see it. So I think as we continue to get more media exposure, that's number one. We're going to have more men that are bought into women's sports. If you look at the stat right now, 52% of women's sports fans identify as male, which is great. We love to see that. I think there's a misconception that only little girls and women can be fans of women's sports. So I just think as we invite more people to the party, I got to interview Caitlin Clark this past year, and I was like, Caitlin, why is it good business to invest in women's sports? And she said, because you're going to be late to the party if you don't. And I was like, that's a great answer, Caitlin. You're great at media, just as you are at basketball. But it's true. More people are joining the party. And we're starting to see more men join the party, and they're bringing their pocketbooks. And we're also seeing women bring their dollars to the table. Billie Jean King is investing big into women's sports. So, I think for me, I'm just really optimistic about the future, because everybody is coming together and getting behind women's sports.
Thank you.
Hey, Anne.
Well, we started with a party. We ended with a party. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight. Special thanks to our panelists, for their insights, for their achievements, and for their dedication to paying it forward. All of you can afford to buy a ticket. There's a new soccer team in town. Open up your pocketbook and support women's sports. That's step one. Thanks, all of you. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you. This was wonderful.
It was great.
It was
Ann was
wonderful.
great.
Yeah, she was awesome.